Hello, everybody. This is David Disraeli from Austin, Texas. This is the Disraeli News Podcast. And today we have a special guest with us, Aviad Nesher, who is in Israel and is a former member of the IDF, or the Israeli Army. And he's going to talk about his experience working with these tunnels, which is what's going on right now. And I will turn it over to you, Avi. Why don't you first tell our viewers what you did in the Israeli military?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, David, for having me on. So in the military, I was part of a Special Forces combat unit in the Nachal Brigade, Reconnaissance Brigade. Um, our job was to do a variety of missions, some of which include tunnel warfare. And just here to kind of share my experience throughout the military from an Israeli perspective, what's going on right now in Gaza and in Israel. Yeah.
So, when you say special operations in the U.S., we have the Navy SEALs, the Army Rangers, the Green Beret. What does it mean in Israel? Because special forces is like a broad term. So, how does it work in Israel?
So in Israel, you have basically the regular brigades, infantry, and then you have one above, which is like the reconnaissance brigade, which is I was part of, and you have the commando units and the other special units, kind of basketed together with different kind of skill sets depending on the mission.
And what was your job exactly most of the time?
So I was a combat medic, so I was in charge of a lot of the medicine, the operational medicine, working with the different military paramedics and doctors when going out on missions. We were kind of one lag behind the unit, and we would go in whenever anyone would get injured or would need any medical assistance or evacuation. And as a medic, you'd also go on operations on arrest operations in the West Bank and around Israel. Whenever we have intelligence and need to do an arrest, they would basically send these special units into these dangerous areas, these refugee camps, and extract people from there.
Gotcha. We talked a little bit about before the show started your experience in the tunnels, both from a training perspective, like these mock tunnels, and then you said that you had been in some of the tunnels underneath Gaza or the West Bank. I don't know which. Tell us about that. Tell us what it's like.
Right. So most of the IDF has some sort of training in underground warfare in the tunnels. Special forces units have more training, and basically we have mock tunnels that we can train in that are similar to what the like one-to-one replicas of what they Hamas and Hezbollah have built in the north and in Gaza. And basically you just train different Israeli techniques, what they teach, how to clear them out and make them safe and destroy them, basically. Make them safe that there aren't any terrorists or any civilians stuck inside these tunnels.
So, has Israel sent commandos into these tunnels before?
So Israel has, we have different kinds of technologies to be able to clear the tunnels, and we have a special forces unit in Israel that their whole kind of operational capabilities is focused on the underground warfare in the tunnels, the detection and the clearing of them and the destruction. So yeah, Israel goes in when needed. It's pretty dangerous, but if we have intelligence that there's hostages being kept in Gaza in these tunnels, then that's something that we will do from time to time.
Okay, so have you personally been inside these tunnels?
So I haven't operationally been in tunnels. I've seen what they look like, what they've been built like. Israel's exposed multiple tunnels built from Gaza and from Hezbollah in the north to the mass media as well. But personally, I haven't, on an operational basis, had to fight in tunnels yet.
So, okay, tell us what it would be like um, when they exposed one of the entry points, and some of them are hidden, better than others, I'm assuming. And then there's the belief that um, both of the major hospitals there are entry points, kind of like a basement where they can go down into
Hmm.
the tunnels, and they're very elaborate from the uh, the pictures that I've seen, or they're not actual pictures, but they're like a rendering. I think the IDF put out. But walk us through that. So you receive information about the existence of either fighters or, in this case, hostages and fighters. And let's say that
Hmm.
they they believe that the hospital is the safest place to go, so they hid them underneath the hospital along with weapons and other things. Um, so they would go into the hospital and take us from there. Take us through what would happen once the commandos enter the hospital and find the entry to the actual tunnel itself. And let's assume
Right.
also that it's intentionally pitch black.
Right. So all of Gaza is basically just an underground maze of tunnels connecting to each other in different ways. The Hamas likes to use tunnels mainly in hospitals and schools because they know that the IDF won't airstrike those areas, and it's very difficult because all the Hamas hide in all these tunnels underneath because they know that if they become above ground, then they'll be just eliminated. And that's what the IDF is trying to do basically with this ground invasion is put pressure on Hamas, try and get Hamas out of these tunnels and start clearing out the areas and forcing them to come out so they can fight them on the ground because it's very difficult to fight inside tunnels. But on the case where there is a tunnel, it would be secured first of all, and then it would be scanned for any kinds of explosive devices or anything like that. And then we have different robots and different capabilities to be able to go in and scan the tunnels without putting people at risk. And all the units basically have night vision, so they'll once they've scanned it, make sure it's clear, make sure there's no explosive charges. They will go in with their ballistic shield and kind of start clearing these tunnels and scanning for hostages and all that kind of stuff. And then we have different capabilities for explosions and different types of stuff for sealing off and destroying these tunnels afterwards, so that they can't be used further by Hamas because they're all connected to each other. So we don't want one tunnel being connected so they can move from place to place.
I've heard that there's miles and miles and miles of tunnels, something like 30 miles. I don't guess that's not good English. I don't think that there's a way to actually measure it. But I'm struggling with trying to visualize them knowing that enough of a swath, for lack of a better word, has clear of human beings, and now it's time to blow it up. That could be like the size of a football field if the explosives were, because there's multiple layers and some of them are really far down.
Right.
Is that right?
Right.
And some of
Yeah.
them aren't
Right.
so far down, and some of them are stacked. Um,
Yeah.
so, how would they know how um,
How
powerful the
far?
explosion is going to be, so that if there's, hostages or people that could potentially be captured because they're valuable, right? They have intelligence if they're
Hmm.
captured somewhere else, and the whole thing's not just going to collapse. That's what comes to mind when I think about trying to bomb like a subway. Really, um,
Hmm.
it's an underground tunnel. So, how does that work?
So we have special technology that can detect how far and how deep and the width and everything of the actual tunnel, and how far it goes. And then we have special forces teams that have been trained specifically on the explosive kind of section of destroying these missiles, and they're explosive experts. And then it's just gone by section to section, blowing up, clearing a whole tunnel, and then blowing that up that section and then moving on until you can try and get all the different tunnels. But again, this is a challenge that Israel has never really faced before. Underground tunnel warfare is something that's fairly new, and at this mass scale, kind of underground tunnels, Israel hasn't faced before. So this is something that they're going to have to kind of incorporate and learn as they go. Yeah.
I'm glad they're doing it and I'm not. Um, so we've got a couple of comments I want to turn into questions. First, though, there's a lot of footage and news reporting about the humanitarian crisis, especially the explosion yesterday at a refugee camp where they've already warned people via text message, phone calls, leaflets to leave the area, and they chose not to. But just from your experience in the past, explain how you conduct a warfare being mindful of civilians and children.
Right.
Because it looks like just a brutal, I'm sorry for interrupting you when I just asked a question, but it looks, like they're just carpet bombing. And I believe they know what they're doing. But you're there and you were in the service. And I'm assuming during that time you did see skirmishes or conflict of some sort. Actual combat, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So how do you reconcile trying to preserve life and yet destroy the enemy when they're sort of, intertwined?
Right. So it's a big challenge. The IDF's values, they teach every soldier one by one. They get a handbook in the first day that they go into the military, and they're taught to value human life, above anything. As a medic, I'm supposed to treat anyone. If they're Palestinian or if they're Israeli and they're Jewish, I don't discriminate. If someone's injured, I'm going to help them. So the IDF puts a big, big emphasis on human life and being humanitarian. I think even more than any other military in the world, the IDF warns people before they're going to bomb areas. They drop thousands of leaflets from the sky. They send SMS text messages. They'll do a mock explosion on the area that doesn't injure anyone before they explode the actual compound many times. And I don't know any other military that does that. It is sad there is always civilians that are caught in the ceasefire, and that's something that does happen in war. But it's just something that you have to try and minimize. The IDF, won't fire on someone unless they're sure that there's a threat, to Israel, to our families, to our civilians. And Hamas uses all the Gazans as human shields. And sometimes, with warning them and telling them we're going to blow up there and everything, they still use them as human shields, and they don't want to leave the area and they don't want to listen. So people do get caught in the ceasefire. And if there's a threat and they're going to shoot rockets or they're going to cause civilian casualties, the IDF will do what's necessary to defend its people.
All right, I'm going to start going through some of the questions. What would you say the average age is of a combat soldier? Obviously, there's officers that are in their 50s and 60s. I'm talking about the boots on the ground.
Right. So the majority of the IDF is people between ages of 18 to 21. You're usually drafted at 18 years old, and you go through combat training. Standard combat training is 8 months long for infantry. And then after that, you'll be sent to one of the borders, one of the areas, and you'll do security routines and security operations in that area. And if there's a war, you'll be called up as well. And all of Israel that has military experience is considered as a reservist. So now, with the situation, almost all the Israeli men, most of them have been called up to go into battle, leaving their families behind. But the standard age for active duty is usually 21 to 18 years old.
So, absent a war and reservist, what would the size of the military be versus what it is now?
Oh wow. I couldn't give you exact numbers on what the active duty numbers are. I know with everything now, it's about 400,000, 500,000 troops, something like that. But active duty wise, I couldn't tell you. I know that active duty soldiers go in first, always into Gaza and into these areas before reservists because they're better trained and they have more experience and they're better in shape and so on.
Right. I've heard reports of naval activity. When I think of Israel, I think of these warplanes that get in, get out, and fire missiles. But they do have a naval operation. What is that all about?
Right. So we do have a Navy as well. We have one of the best air forces in the world, but we have Navy SEALs of our own, and we have naval ships. And these Hamas recently have been getting naval equipment with boats and diving equipment, and they've tried to infiltrate to the area of Ashkelon to try and get into the Israeli beaches and kidnap Israeli civilians and create terror in Israel. So the IDF Navy works very hard as well to scan any kinds of boats coming in, and there's been they'll go out on their boats and they'll see divers in the ocean and they'll have to eliminate those threats while riding on the boat. So there's been many instances of that where they've had to throw grenades in the water and fire at divers trying to get into the beaches of Israel.
So they're patrolling in ships, boats. How would you describe the? They're not warships, right? You can't maneuver those. Is it more like a Coast Guard cutter size ship that can maneuver all over the place? Um,
Yeah, we have different size. We have small, like kind of speedboats where a few soldiers will be on there with their machine gun and their personal weapons and grenades. And then we have these a little bit bigger ships, which they have big mounted weapons on them that they're kind of kept on the border that they can use those to fire. And we have bigger ships as well with different kind of missile capabilities for
okay.
different kind of rockets.
Um, Talk about infrared and heat sensing technology to find human beings that are trying to hide. Um, I'm not trying to recreate James Bond here, but I know that they do have both airplanes and other vehicles have the ability to see in the night, not just night vision goggles, but heat sensing technology. I've seen it on film where you see bodies moving from way up in the air. How does all that work?
So I can't really go into too much detail about that, but there are different technologies that you can see people like literally through walls and bushes and stuff like that, and different kinds of scopes that snipers will use and marksmen that you can see from miles and miles away. Heat signatures, like let's say you're going through the desert and you're patrolling and it's pitch black dark and there's rocks everywhere and you use bushes where people could be hiding. So you can just pop one of those up with a marksman and you can see where people are. So it's quite useful.
Is that something they have in aircraft as well?
Yeah, in aircraft, it's very, very advanced. They have night vision capabilities, heat signatures. Their helmets are just like, even just their helmet is worth like $500,000 or so. It's so advanced, all the technologies.
I want one. How do they keep the supply lines of food and everything going while they're in a place like Gaza? Obviously, it's got to come from outside through supply trucks, but those are the least protected people and equipment as far as they're not armored, right? Or are they? But how do they keep all the soldiers fed? Would it be? It seems like it would be so easy to pick off one of those workers that's trying to just bring food and fuel, whatever, with the handgun. How do they do that? How do they keep them supplied?
Right. It's not too complicated. We have these things called manakim in the army, which is like these kind of ready-made meals, which most of it's like tuna cans and canned food and stuff like that, stuff that doesn't go bad. So you'll carry a lot of that weight is food and water that you're carrying with you to sustain you for 1, 2 weeks. And then you will have, whenever you go into an area, you have your bases that are kept farther back with more security. And there's tanks there, and there's infantry, and there's people securing the area. And the food will be brought in from Israel to that area. And that will be like a midway point where soldiers will have to return to get their food and then go back. So that's kind of how Israel does it. They have those supply points. And I have to say also the citizens of Israel have really kind of took this mission upon themselves to feed the soldiers. They brought donations for meals and everything to all the different bases. But during active combat, you just carry the food that you get from these different supply points that are set up, that are secured.
Interesting. Well, let's talk about the needs for a minute, and then we will wrap it up. We do have direct contact with charitable organizations on the ground in Israel to distribute things to soldiers and to families that have been displaced, whose homes have either been destroyed or it's not safe to live, and that's extremely stressful. Obviously, losing your home, dealing with grief. What are some of the needs that exist right now that you're aware of? Is it mainly soldiers, people that are displaced, or is it sort of a combination of everything?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd say like one of the biggest things is also prayer. Prayer is always very important, to pray for Israel, pray for the IDF soldiers, that they'll all be kept safe. And on the more kind of basis of needs, a lot of families have been displaced and don't have homes. I think about 500,000 Israelis have been displaced, some of them receiving no support from other people. A lot of people aren't working right now, and or have lost their jobs, or their just businesses have totally been shut down. So it's just really helping those families that are struggling, the citizens that are suffering, because even just today, I tried to go get something to eat, and the store owner just shut down in the middle of the day because they had like 0 customers. You know, he's like, he doesn't even have a reason to open his store. So it's sad that people are losing their businesses, losing their homes. All the north has been evacuated in the Gaza area. So just helping where you see that you can help. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing.
Okay. Well, thanks for that insight. War is never good. There's no winners for sure. So I appreciate your time and your insight. We may be able to have you on again. We'll have comments and questions, I'm sure, that'll be posted and emailed. We couldn't get to everybody today. I wanted to quickly show our giving link for people that are interested. The name of my organization, Disraeli News, is mine, but I am the treasurer of a charitable 501c3 here in Austin, and I put together a giving link just for Israel, which is on our website. If you go to disraelinews.org/give, you'll be able to see this gigantic give or donate button. I couldn't have made it any bigger. No way to miss it. And 100% of that money is going to go to Israel, and to the soldiers and to the people that need it. Every nickel. We don't take a penny we're all volunteers. I own a business. My partner owns a business, the CEO or president. So if you want to give to Israel, if you want to support the people that live there and the soldiers, that link will take you directly to a PayPal account of our 501c3, and it will immediately be sent to Israel. Avi, thank you for your time, and God bless you.